This was Shawn Michaels on an episode of Raw in 1997.
McMahon, and I admire your guts for giving me a live mic on Raw is War in the mood that I'm.
As you can see, Shawn was clearly inebriated during this promo that aired on Monday Night Raw. This kind of behavior is indicative of who HBK was in the 90s. Now, we all know that Shawn is a changed man some 30 years later. He is, as many have described, a much different and better man than he was during his dark years. Michaels found God and became a born-again Christian shortly after meeting his wife, Rebecca Curci. Curci was a nitro girl for WCW. Nowadays, the legendary wrestler is the Vice President of Talent Development Creative at WWE and runs NXT. He's far more low-key and clean-cut these days as he lends his coaching abilities to all the wrestlers that pass through WWE's door. Shawn started his career with WWE in 1987 as one half of the Rockers alongside Marty Jannetty. The two were fired 2 weeks later after Michaels smashed a glass over his head at a bar. However, they were rehired a year later, and the rest, as they say, is history. Like many wrestlers who were around in the 80s, Michaels got into the party life. He and Jannetty quickly became infamous for partying hard and all the demons that comes with that lifestyle. After breaking up with Jannetty and becoming a single star, Shawn's wild ways only increased. He became a menacing force behind the scenes as the leader of the Kliq, a backstage faction which consisted of Triple H, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and X-Pac. Together, the group pretty much did whatever they wanted by terrorizing other talents. Whether it was holding them down by manipulating Vince McMahon or participating in antics like the curtain call, no one was safe from the wrath of Michaels and the Kliq. Many wrestling fans have wondered why HBK was able to get away with so much, given the fact that he was not a bigger star or draw than guys like Hogan, Austin, and even his arch nemesis Bret Hart. It is puzzling to some how HBK didn't wind up fired for any of these antics. However, there is maybe a crazy theory out there that has been talked about for years as to why Shawn got away with so much. Let's look into the madman that was Shawn Michaels in the 90s. Scott Hall is one of the more notable names that opened up about the party life he and Michaels were living. Hall noted how he and Michaels would spend all night on the road doing drugs in their hotel room. They often wondered if the other was even alive to take more drugs. This was scary, no doubt. It is incredible that Shawn put on some great matches like the ladder match with Hall at WrestleMania 10 after a bender of intense partying. This is an attribute to what kind of a generational talent Michaels was in his prime. Imagine how much greater he'd have been if he had his head on straight during these years. That's pretty insane to think about. Michaels' career is judged in two parts: his run with the WWF from 1988 to 1998, and his return to the WWE, which lasted from 2002 to 2010. If his career consisted of only one of those remarkable runs, he would have been a first ballot Hall of Famer either way. I would argue that Shawn's first run was more entertaining from a behind-the-scenes perspective, given the many legends and tales that are attached to his name, while his second run was far better from an on-screen perspective as he really hit his stride and became Mr. WrestleMania during that time frame. Let's get the most notable of these backstage tales out of the way right at the jump. Everyone and their grandmother knows about the Montreal Screwjob. In Bret Hart's documentary, Wrestling with Shadows, backstage footage from the infamous night in Montreal made the cut. In the footage, Bret bluntly asked Shawn if he had any knowledge of what was going to take place, to which Shawn very nervously swore he had no prior knowledge. He swore on his family in what was a tough spot even for Shawn, who had hated Bret for years. Their rivalry is one of the most important and highly controversial in the history of the wrestling business. These two traded insults and backstage fights, where allegedly Shawn got beat up by Bret in the bathroom while Jerry Lawler was using the facilities. Shawn was in a bad place during this feud in particular, according to people who were there like Jim Ross. Ross noted how Shawn would show up in conditions that were less than ideal for the workplace. This bled into on-screen when Shawn made a sunny days comment to Bret on Monday Night Raw in an off-the-cuff moment. Ironically, Shawn was the one who was having an affair with Sunny, not Bret. Bret and Sunny were friends, and she would help Bret with his kids and things like that. but they were never involved with each other the way Shawn was with her. Sunny wrote some pretty graphic and intimate details about her time spent with Shawn in her autobiography, A Star Shattered, The Rise and Fall of Wrestling Diva Tammy Sytch. Details that I will leave out of this video. Needless to say, the two were close. And why was this a problem, you may ask? Well, Sunny was dating someone at the time, and not just a random person. She was dating fellow wrestler Chris Candido. To put it kindly, Candido seemed to be okay with what transpired between his girlfriend and Shawn. Hall told a hilariously sad story of how he and Kevin Nash would stand guard of the locker room while Shawn and Sunny were getting to know each other. They would keep lookout for Candido. The image of Scott Hall and Kevin Nash being bouncers for the locker room while Candido is looking for his wife is something out of a soap opera. Honestly, that would have made for better TV than what WWE was putting out at the time during the mid-90s. Bruce Pritchard said Chris either knew it was happening and didn't care, or he was completely clueless. These comments were made on his podcast, Something to Wrestle, with Bruce Pritchard. He followed up by saying that Shawn and Sunny went on vacation to a Caribbean island or something like that. And when they returned, Sunny was openly showing pictures of her and Shawn to numerous talents. Pritchard was just like, well, Chris, you gonna do something? Johnny Candido, brother of Chris, confirmed that Chris truly had no idea what was going on between Sunny and Shawn, or he just chose to ignore it. So when he wasn't partaking in the most infamous moment in wrestling history or ruining a marriage, 90s Shawn Michaels was using his prowess backstage to get what he wanted. Notable political victims include Shane Douglas, Vader, and Marty Jannetty. Let's talk about Vader first, as his career was perhaps the most affected by the antics of HBK. Vader signed to the WWF in 1996 after a high-profile career in WCW and Japan. He was brought in along with hefty promises from Vince McMahon, including that the chairman would make Vader WWF champion. He would then drop the belt back to Shawn at Royal Rumble 97 in San Antonio. Following that loss, he'd win the title again at WrestleMania 13. All of this did happen, but not to Vader. It was Sid Vicious who ended up with the spot instead. This happened because, as Jim Ross admitted on Grilling JR, Shawn Michaels killed Vader's push. A visible example of this sentiment can be seen during Vader and Shawn's match at SummerSlam 1996, where Shawn goes up for an elbow off the turnbuckle, but instead jumps down, lands on his feet, and shoot kicks Vader in the head, followed by yelling. Randy Orton had a similar interaction with Kofi Kingston, resulting in the infamous moment where Orton can be heard calling Kofi stupid repeatedly. This moment was the straw that broke the camel's back for Vader's time as a top star in WWE. Prior to the SummerSlam match, Vader and Shawn worked the house show circuit together for a few months, during which Vader was allegedly very stiff with Shawn in the ring, causing Shawn to complain directly to Vince about it. Jim Cornette said that Shawn even made Vader cry one time after a match. Vader pulled Shawn's hair too hard and hit him with a few stiff punches, and in the locker room, Shawn told Vader that if you ever do that to me again, I'll make sure it's your last night here. Supposedly, Vader was crying to Cornette and said Shawn was going to take his livelihood away. This was the kind of guy Michaels was back in the day. Vader's WWF career faded away as he became an enhancement talent up until the end of his run in 1998. Next up is Shane Douglas, or Dean Douglas as he was known during his time in the WWF. For Douglas, it depends on who you ask that will determine who was responsible for his downfall in WWE. It seems like Vince himself played a large role in this, considering that Douglas was forced to miss the annual Christmas MSG house show with back spasms. McMahon questioned the legitimacy of the injury and fired Douglas over the incident. Seemingly, Douglas was just not a fit with WWE, and he wanted out of the company based on his run-ins with the Kliq. This may be evident due to the fact that shortly after his release from WWE, he was right back in the thick of things in ECW, wrestling main event matches. It is well documented that he and Scott Hall held no love lost for each other, and this could have been a reason for Douglas's failure in WWE. However, Shawn Michaels refused to drop the Intercontinental title to Douglas after being beaten up at a bar in Syracuse, New York by 9 Marines. That's right, 9 United States Marines beat up Shawn Michaels. HBK, the British Bulldog, and X-Pac were out on the town, allegedly drunk and high off God knows how many pills. Sure enough, trouble ensues as a pilled out Shawn hits on the wife of a patron. The patron, who happened to be a Marine, politely tells the other guys to get their boy away from his wife. The group leaves the bar, and as they're leaving, Shawn rolls his window down and begins berating the Marine. Douglas Griffith has been identified as the perpetrator thanks to local news stories and police records. No one knows for certain if it was 9 Marines who beat up Shawn. There are several conflicting reports, including Triple H declaring it was a group of 6 men on Shawn's A&E documentary. Marty Jannetty claimed it was just one guy. However, the incident was so bad that it could have been fatal because the drunk Shawn was just being beaten repeatedly by this man. So much so that he nearly had his eyelid torn off. Michaels was scheduled to drop the IC title to Douglas at the upcoming In Your House pay-per-view, which was set to take place about a week prior to the incident. Due to the injuries, HBK could not compete, so instead he forfeited the title over to Douglas, who lost it to Razor Ramon 20 minutes later. Douglas never regained the title. Some, including Douglas, questioned the severity of Michaels' injuries, as Douglas claimed he saw Shawn the day of In Your House. He noted that Shawn looked fine and didn't have a scratch on him, even claiming that Shawn went into the makeup room and had bruises put on him by the makeup girls. This real-life incident did turn into a storyline as Shawn went on TV and claimed he couldn't defend his title because he was beaten by 9 men that saved him from facing the overrated Douglas. It seems to me that Shawn simply refused to do the job for Douglas and politicked Razor to win the belt. This incident turned storyline did a lot for Shawn's career in the long run and helped make him a sympathetic babyface after WWE ran an angle where Owen caused Shawn to re-aggravate his injuries. The angle was quite good and features Shawn receiving medical treatment and breathing with the help of an oxygen mask. It just goes to show that you really do have to be a selfish jerk at times to reach the heights of superstardom in the wrestling business. Douglas had his career ruined thanks to his dealings with the Kliq, while Shawn goes on to become the top star in the company mere months later. Jim Cornette infamously stated that Michaels is 0 for life in real-life fights, and so far, that sentiment has proven true. It will continue to prove true as Shawn was beaten down not once, but twice by his former best friend and tag partner, Marty Jannetty. The first incident was well documented on Jannetty's Dark Side of the Ring episode. Basically, the two were having internal problems. You know, just how brothers get when they travel together, share a hotel, wrestle together, nothing crazy. But one thing leads to another, and Marty's beating the ever-living hell out of Shawn in a fight that was stirred up by Roddy Piper, supposedly. The fight continued until police arrived. Thankfully, shortly thereafter, Macho Man arrived and assured the police that they were just rehearsing for a big match they had that night. He signed a few autographs and took some pictures for the police, and just like that, nothing ever happened. The second incident is not so well documented. This one was retold by Douglas, who claims he and Mr. Perfect were in the locker room when Shawn came back from a match with Marty. Shortly thereafter, Marty comes in and Shawn knew what was about to happen and gave himself up for the beating. He likely knew he deserved the beating because he used his influence backstage to get Marty sent home for a few months after their split, and Marty was pissed about it. Apparently, Vince told Marty about the firing in the gorilla position right after the match. Marty claims he was promised a big singles push, and that push was killed at the hands of HBK. Let's rapid fire some more infamous incidents that Shawn was in the center of. There was the MSG incident, or the curtain call. That topic deserves its own video, so here's a brief overview. When Razor Ramon and Kevin Nash were at their final house show with the WWF before leaving for WCW, they, Triple H, and Shawn embraced in the middle of the ring. This was unheard of at the time because 2 guys were heels and 2 guys were babyfaces. Heels and babyfaces did not interact with each other in a friendly way or break character like this. 2 fans recorded the incident with their camcorder, resulting in what was maybe the first viral internet moment in wrestling history. Of course, Shawn did not get punished for this incident because, well, he was Shawn and the WWE champion at the time. Then there was the Harris brothers, or the Blue Brothers as they were known in WWE. When they were leaving the company, Shawn made some rude comments directed their way. This resulted in Ron Harris grabbing Shawn by his throat and slamming him up against the wall. It took Kevin Nash getting physically involved to defuse the situation. This is an insane resume for controversy. It just keeps growing. Shawn Michaels almost single-handedly derailed the Attitude Era before it even started by threatening to not put over Stone Cold at WrestleMania 14. We know Shawn was in an awful place at the time personally, and he probably doesn't even remember half of these incidents. He stated he has no recollection of the infamous Syracuse beating. Regardless, this one is pretty tough to defend. Steve Austin was the rightful heir to the WWE throne, and HBK took a disliking to that since he had been Vince's favorite for some time. Undertaker tells this pretty awesome story of how he was going to beat Shawn's ass if he refused to do the job or played politics with Vince. Undertaker basically told him the day of the event, if you still have that belt at the end of the night, we are going to have problems. Seemingly, Shawn had problems with everyone, not just jobbers or mid-carders or Marines, but the biggest stars in the business. This included The Rock, who apparently turned down a match with Shawn in the early 2000s after he returned. Rock's reason for turning this match down was due to Shawn being disrespectful to his maternal grandmother. Leah Mavia promoted a branch of the NWA in Hawaii, and supposedly a very young Shawn Michaels did not treat her well. Not too many details are known about this incident, but Rock held this grudge for a while. This grudge led to bad blood between Rock and Triple H and Shawn Michaels. Shawn saw Rock as a threat to the top spot he thought belonged to his buddy Triple H. Rock did become a bigger star, so I guess there was cause for concern in a particularly insecure business. The bad blood led to the bullying of Rock by the DX founders. According to Bret Hart's book, Shawn had persuaded Vince to have Bret take the Intercontinental title away from Rock. This was smart as it killed two birds with one stone for Michaels, as he would bury Rock and demote Bret simultaneously. Bret pushed back and went to bat for Rock. Rock is very grateful that Bret stood up for him. Honestly, this moment from Bret is at least a tiny bit partially responsible for making Rock the star he became in the WWF. How Shawn got away with all of these things is incredible. There's more, like his dust-ups with Bam Bam Bigelow, which you can easily find online. Bam Bam essentially said that Shawn and the Kliq buried other talents just to make themselves laugh. Man, wrestling is a weird, weird world. That question of how Shawn got away with this stuff is one not just asked by me and many fans, but also wrestlers. Notably, this includes the Road Warriors. They detailed during a shoot interview prior to the passing of Hawk how they had not seen anyone in the WWE prior or after Shawn, including Stone Cold, Hulk Hogan, and Ultimate Warrior, get away with the things that Vince allowed Shawn to get away with. Shawn was not selling out 93,000 seat arenas or leading the WWE to going public on the stock market like those guys were. It is downright perplexing to many. Shawn was a big star in the 90s and an even bigger star in the 2000s, but he was never, even at the peak of his powers, a huge needle mover for WWE. He was WWE champion during the worst era in WWE history from a business standpoint from 1995 to 1997. Now, he wasn't champion the whole time, but majority of the time he was. Yet he was Teflon in Vince's eyes. Vince let go of Bret without hesitation to go to WCW, he let go of Nash and Hall, and so many others at the time, but kept Shawn. Many speculate and some believe a rumor that Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon were lovers. Now I know how crazy that sounds. The Road Warriors insinuated this during their shoot interview, and Bret Hart has gone on record to say this too. Even Shane Douglas implied that the two had some sort of quote business backstage. I know this rumor seems crazy and wild, like I said, but given that this is Vince McMahon we're talking about, and given all the crazy stuff we have learned about him recently, nothing involving that man would surprise me. These rumors resurfaced when MMA legend spoke about them on a recent episode of Andrew Schultz's podcast. The former fighter claimed that McMahon would sleep with female talent and male talent, also noting that he'd hold their careers over their heads. The claims get wilder as he continued by saying that straight men would engage in this activity to secure a bigger push and better pay. And the only name he mentioned specifically was Shawn Michaels, although it was brief and he did not elaborate on it when questioned. It's no secret to anyone involved in the wrestling business that Vince had a fascination with Shawn. Several wrestling personalities dismissed the notion of their relationship being sexual in any way. Notably, Jim Ross, who was asked about these claims, emphatically dismissed them. Ross clarified the rumors by stating how Vince's love for Shawn was that of a father and son. Vince saw a lot of himself in Shawn from a personality standpoint, and he respected that Shawn would be the only person to ever tell him to F off to his face. Most wrestlers and employees alike are often too scared or intimidated by Vince, but not Shawn, as he would speak his mind to Vince at any given moment. However, it is still confusing as to why Shawn got away with so much controversy. What do you think it was about Shawn? Were he and Vince romantically involved? Or was it simply Vince looked at Shawn like a son and gave him special treatment? Or was it something else that allowed Shawn to get away with the things he did? Let me know what you think in the comments, and thank you all for watching.